Wow, what a way of life. What a change. What a blessing. This workshop actually started in my house with 12 guys last November. With 12 guys that I sponsor and some of the guys that they sponsor. And kind of started getting too big for the house. But we brought it over here, and now we're almost growing out of here. So I don't know, it's something about this fellowship. It just keeps happening. It just keeps growing. I've done several workshops. I've done several step series. Sponsored a lot of people. Continue to sponsor a lot of people. It's a way of life for me. And I try to live my life the best I can out of this book, practicing these principles. You guys help me please open this meeting with a moment of silence followed by the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. In our sponsorship /step/ big book workshop, we go through the big book and we parch the sentences and we teach how to work steps. We try to help sponsors be more confident in their sponsorship abilities. That was the original goal of the workshop, and we've been along the same lines for 8 months now. I wasn't able to be here last week because I was preparing myself for a Bimini trip. Brandon was kind enough to let me know where we left off. I guess we should probably read how it works first, right? You want to read how it works for me, Jose?
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm an alcoholic. My name is Jose. How it works, Chapter 5. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to the simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. They're such unfortunates. They're not at fault, they seem to have been born that way. They're naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover and they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas and the result was nil until we'll let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help it is too much for us, but there is one who has all power. That one is God, and you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. He asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps that we took which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore sanity. 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6. We were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7. Humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11. Sought for prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaim, "What an order, I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We're not saints. The point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic is chapter 3 agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if we were sought.
God can and will if you'll seek Him. From the first edition. God can and will if you seek Him. And that's been my experience, and that's the experience of the book. And tonight we're going to be talking about the last part of the 4-step. We went through the 4-step in about 4 weeks. I think we were about that long on it, weren't we, Brandon? Talking about the 4 major categories of it and all the solutions to it for each of the major categories. I guess we're going to be kind of closing out the 4-step with the sex ideal and what happens supposedly that we move forward in our lives and we stumble and we fall from our ideal for our future sex life. It was undoubtedly talked about last week. It's got, oddly enough, it's on page 69. It talks about sex there, and gives a bunch of questions to ask. And what my experience was through asking these questions is that I found out that I was, back when I did my 4-step, I found out that beyond the shadow of any doubt, I was absolutely 100% the most selfish, self-centered, use this word, ladies, prick that you ever want to meet. Cared about nobody, and it was all about me. And that's what I learned out of my sexual inventory from the history of it. That's what it was designed to do, too. Basically to show you just how uncaring you were. Everybody's may not be to that extreme, but mine was. And the only reason we do it is so that we can form an ideal for our future sex lives. It's the only reason that we're doing that inventory. One is we need to see what our makeup was. And the second part of it, or the answer to it, is to formulate an ideal, mold an ideal for our future sex life so that we don't continue to harm others and hurt ourselves in the course. I've learned throughout the last several years of my life that anytime I'm hurting somebody else, I'm cutting myself off from the sunlight of the Spirit. I'm cutting myself off from God. And the flip side of that, anytime I'm allowing somebody else to hurt me, I'm being cut off also. So I got to be careful both ways. I'm not allowed to hurt anybody if I can help it, and nobody's allowed to hurt me because it interferes with my relationship with my Creator. So the future sex ideal was a biggie, because especially for the guys, for everybody I gotta say, but especially for the guys. I know more so with the men because that's predominantly who I've sponsored. And anybody that's been around recovery in the rooms long enough and have heard enough stories knows that one of the biggest issues is, how do I get laid sober? How do I do that? I've never done that before. And it's a scary thing. Most of us have been annihilated from the time we were teenagers. And I know this, a lot of guys or a lot of men just don't know how to do it. And unfortunately, I've witnessed hundreds of cases where they do the wrong thing and go out and pay for it. And they usually end up having a drink or a crack stem hanging out of their lip or something else because they went about it the wrong way. They stumble and they fall. Granted, most of these people are people that have not usually done the work or worked the steps. Because if you've done the work of the 4-step, you hopefully, if your sponsor was sharp enough, he was able to point things out to you, like if you do this, this is what happens. And I'm telling you all this because it's all leading up into what we're getting ready to talk about. It said that this sex ideal we took seriously, we thought well about it. we asked God to help us to mold it. And we meditated on what our future sex life should be like, so that we wouldn't be out there selfishly hurting other people, just using them for our own gratification. And it says, whatever our ideal turns out to be, at the bottom of page 69, the last paragraph, we must be willing to grow towards it. We must be willing to make amends where we had done harm to the other people, provided that we won't still what? Do more harm to them by doing so. So in other words, we're not allowed to go and make any kind of amends because it may hurt somebody else. A lot of people that we've had past sex relations with have moved on, and they got a new wife or a new boyfriend or new significant other, and by you approaching that individual and talking about the sexcapade that you shared with them or relationship you shared with them, may spark all kinds of jealousy up, and maybe not in them, but maybe in their partner. They want to find out why you're talking to that guy or why you're talking to that gal, and the next thing you know, there's a bigger jackpot or a bigger mess for them to straighten out, and it's hurting. You're now hurting other people. We're not allowed to do that. Goes on to say, in other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. If we want it. You know how many times I've meditated on something, I've brought God in prayer a problem? Especially when it comes to sex. And I don't like the answer I get, because it shouldn't. No, that's not going to work. I really want to sleep with her. She's hot, God. Forget about all that. And don't live up to it. Sometimes I've fallen short of it. I'm not a saint. I'm not perfect. And pay for it. And pay for it. By feelings of guilt, feelings of shame, remorse, things that kick off within, that I could have avoided if I would have listened to the dictates of my higher power, or my higher self, or my better judgment. However you want to put it. To me, it's God talking to me. When I'm doing the right thing, it's usually because I meditated, and when I come out of meditation, I know what the right thing is to do. Now, whether I do it or not is two different things. and quite often, and if people have tried this and have worked at this program long enough, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and you can relate with it perfectly. Because even though we've been cured of a lot of things, there's some things in life that all of us don't always want to necessarily give up. Or at least for me anyways. Goes on to say that God alone can judge our sex situation. So anybody that wants to judge me for anything I did, you can jam it up your rear end, because it's between me and my Creator, and I got to have it out with Him, and your opinion really means nothing. Means nothing. So I've learned that the best opinion to have on anybody's sexual relations is none. Teach them that it's something that's private, it's intimate, it's between them and God. And hopefully that they, if you can counsel them a little bit and help them to find their way, great. I wouldn't go a step further than that, because it's usually, my experience has been, it blows up in your face. You always get caught up in that little triangle. And that's exactly what the book got ready to say. Counsel with others is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. We avoid it. Now, this is the clicker right here, the next paragraph. It says, suppose we fall short of this chosen ideal and stumble. Direct question. Suppose this happens. Does this mean that we're going to get drunk? That's a pretty serious question. Some people tell us so. That is only a half-truth. It depends on us and on our motives. We are sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us on to better things. We believe we will be forgiven and we will have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. That's the severity and the seriousness of this situation. Why is it so severe, because for us to drink is to die. For us to just run around and recklessly end up with anybody that we stumble across as a sex partner cuts us off from the sunlight of the Spirit. It's like that. It's like cut. They told us here, if we're sorry for what we've done, earnestly pray for forgiveness, that we will be forgiven. But if it's not coming from the heart, and you're not coming real, and if you're not thinking well about this, and it's just words and you're only mouthing it and lipping it, don't expect the miracle to happen. Don't expect it to happen. This is serious stuff. And if you've been paying attention around the rooms, you'll see it happen all the time. I can't begin to tell you how many guys I see go out because they didn't know how to get laid sober. And it's a tragedy that it happens. And that the teaching of it is, you hardly ever hear it. You don't hear this stuff. You don't hear this stuff in your normal lay AA meeting. It goes on to say that if we're not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience. These facts were formulated back in '39 when the book was written. So it's, if it was true then, I'm sure it's still true today. If it's true then, I'm sure it's still true today. To sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, and for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. The imperious, what do they call it? The imperious urge. The wording that Bill picks and uses is like, wake up and listen. What the hell does that mean? Imperious urge. For me, it goes back to the natural instincts that we learned about in the 4th step. All of us are born with natural instincts, sex, security, and society. And that when these natural instincts in us and the alcoholic are warped, they're warped and perverted by fear. Fear was the evil and corroding thread. 12 and 12 in the 4th step talks in great deal about that. I try not to go too much off into the 12 and 12, but I have read it. It just was a whole nother side to the 4th step that I wasn't privy to, because I don't think I'm the smartest guy in the world. I just try to keep it simple and keep it to this because this is what works. The sponsor tells me that there's no directions in there, so leave it alone. I say, okay, I leave it alone, but I can pick up some helpful hints by simply just investigating it. And all of us are adults. All of us know that there's a natural instinct for sex. And sometimes when arousal comes up, it's hard to quiet that imperious urge. It's hard to quiet it, and a lot of people get jammed up behind it. And me being a father last night of a 12-year-old who just had her period. It was a very little, she had her period about 6 months ago. It was a very much a 12 years old, completely selfish and self-centered. I mean, it's her little world, and she wants to run with her little friends and do what she wants to do, and she's scratching, barking, and biting for freedom, and she's hired and firing boyfriends every day of the week, and she's trying to break loose from the house. She doesn't want to go to a summer camp and be in a structured environment, which Daddy's insisting upon. She wants to hang out with her friend that lives a couple doors down and walk off down to Eckerd's and meet the boys in the next complex that live over there, that some of them are 14, 15, and 17. and they all got different names, and and I found myself cautioning her last night, and then trying to teach her just out of my worldly experience, my knowledge. And unfortunately, her and her mother and I never got along. It was just it was a fling thing back when, and we never kind of really hit it off. And Mom's been drinking a little bit lately, and Mom did something, and told me that she kissed a boy, and she didn't tell her mother. And I had been talking to her mother about it. I'm just giving you the story for a reason, to make a point. And I told her mother that, she's a little lady. She's my little girl. I don't want her running around out there in the streets. I can't have it. I can't even work at work because I'm distracted knowing that she's, out in the world, running with boys, doing all the stuff I did, telling lies and saying I'm going to Eckerd's and I'm really over at Jimmy's, or down at the lake with Susie, Sally, Paul, and Rocky. And her mother somehow said, "Daddy don't want you going out anymore," or something like that. And she was half drunk and did it the wrong way and kind of threw me under the bus, so to speak. So she called me and she said, "Daddy, why can't I go out anymore? Mommy said you said I can't go out with my friends anymore and play." And I said, "No, honey, that wasn't it." And I told her what my real fears and my real concerns were. My real fear and my real concerns is that she's going to end up with the 14 and 15, 16 and 17-year-old boys around, and that perhaps one of them may force himself upon her, and she might have an unpleasant experience. And I was able to back it up by an experience her stepmother had that she never knew about. And it was a severe experience of her stepmother having been molested by her father, by her own father. And I said, look, if the natural instinct for sex is that strong within a human that an own father could do it to his own daughter, I said, it's kind of a no-brainer to think that, somebody that's not related at all may take advantage of you, and that's where my real fear comes from, honey. That's why I'm so scared. That's why I don't want you running around unsupervised at the age of 12 without having some kind of supervised activities going on. And I was just happy, tickle pink with myself, because that little girl accepted it. She understood it. She said, okay. She had no problem with it. She said, okay, well, when I get back from sleepaway camp next week, she said, we'll go over to the rec center and figure out what kind of supervised activity we can get into. And case closed. The urge for sex is awesome. It's enough to drive people crazy. And we got to be careful with it. We got to be extremely careful when we're trying to teach others about it, because it's an area that can pretty much automatically close us off from the sunlight of the Spirit, from God's grace. And if that happens, we're headed for certain trouble. And when the book goes back to talking about drinking, well, my experience relapsing is I picked that thing up, put it back in me, and I couldn't shut it off. It had me. And it didn't only have me, it wanted me dead. I don't know about everybody else, but the last time I came in, I couldn't stop. And I wanted to stop, but I was doing all kinds of things against my own willpower. So the thought that needs to go into this, when it says that we pray and we meditate, we ask God to help us to mold this ideal, it's serious stuff. Because like most people, none of us are going to be saints. And not a whole lot of us are going to be willing to give up sex for recovery. So just word of caution is what I'm saying, is be the utmost cautious if you can. And remember that this is a sponsorship workshop, and we're trying to light the fire that that we're thinking when we're working with other people. That the flags are there already. This could be an area of somebody's life that if they're not taught or trained properly, could possibly kill them. And it's real. Because I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen. I've taken people up through the 4-step and had them stop doing the work, and I've had seen certain deaths within the last 7 years of my life because they were unwilling. They didn't adhere. They didn't succumb to. They didn't believe it. The book made no bones about it. It said, these are facts. These are facts. And for us to have to face the fact of ever having to possibly end up drunk again certainly can lead to possible death or insane asylum or jail. Because we don't know when we get to put it back down again. Last paragraph, page 70. If we have been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. Notice the word thorough. I had somebody asking me tonight about their sexual inventory list. Does this mean I got to put down everybody? I said, yeah, everybody. Yeah, but Jim said I could just kind of put the one night stands into one little category over there. I said, look, I don't care if you don't remember their name. Put it with Susie the redhead from the bar or from the 5th Street of whatever in New York City. And put them all down. And the reason is because we're trying to be thorough. The more instances that you got to relate to, the harder it is to deny the true nature of your problem. That's why we got to be fearless and thorough, like it talks about in the 5th chapter. We beg. 5th chapter makes no bones about it on page 58. Flip back to it. Let's see. 3rd paragraph. It says, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. And it's talking about when we jump into this work. We beg of you to be fearless and thorough. It's imperative that we're fearless and as thorough as we possibly can be, because we need every instance that we can possibly get in order to have the numeration of experiences. Okay, back to page 70. If we have been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentments. This is what happened when we did a thorough 4-step. You've listed and analyzed your resentments. You've begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality, which means that you're already realizing their terrible destructiveness, that you don't do well when you're full of anger, hate, or rage. And that as soon as it turns on, which happens to me all the time, it happens to me right here. My own sponsor pisses me off, Jim, because we work together and I'm around him a lot. And my 12-year-old pisses me off every now and then because she don't listen to me. And my significant other or somebody that I'm in a relationship with or I'm around a lot, they seem to piss me off because they don't listen to me or do something the way I think that it should have been done, and things wouldn't be messed up if they would have listened. And so I'm finding that analyzing, that we have listed and analyzed our resentments, that I've begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality in my life. One of the things that I've learned to ask myself just along them lines that might help somebody else is I had a real hard time. My wife relapsed a few years ago. She couldn't get back in. She kept relapsing, and we kept trying. I kept trying. I didn't give up. Finally, somebody said to me one day, why don't you do whatever it is that you would tell a sponsee to do? If your sponsee had the same problem, what would you do if he was coming to you with that problem? What would you tell him to do? And that was the answer to my question 3 years later. Get away. It's poison. It's going to kill you. It's a wild flame. And for me, at that point in time, that was the answer. What would I tell somebody else to do? Another way of looking at it is, how would you feel if you were in their shoes? That's all it's real helpful stuff. We've begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. So I come to find out that throughout the 4-step, and I learned in the 4-step, that resentments are poison. Anger's poison. They're a luxury for normal people. It's something that I can't afford. I find myself every day in steps 10 and 11. Not every day, but every week. Guaranteed somebody's pissed me off or stepped on my toes or hurt my feelings, because I'm a highly sensitive individual. And they might not even know that they said it. They might have said it in a nice way, and I still took it the wrong way. There's, something's not always all the way right with me. I err on the side of caution. I go and I sit down and I write them down and write them out in a prayer, because I can't afford to be cut off from the sunlight. I know what happens when I know the futility and the fatality of it. If I let it fester, if I let it sit with me long enough, I'm going to get angry, pissed, and mad enough that I'm going to say, get out of here, and I'm gone. That's what happens. That's what happens. And I've seen it happen to people. They don't take it seriously. These are all things that we're learning in our 4-step as a result of doing the work. You know what? I didn't know that I was learning that when I did it. This was just part of this psychic change that was taking part in here. It was part of the miracle that was happening. It was a change in psyche. It happened automatically. It happened as a result of me doing the work. All of a sudden, the insanity was leaving and the sanity was returning. And it all makes perfect sense today. And God made that happen. I wasn't completely restored to sanity up until the 10th step, but it started taking place back in the 4th step. Because as soon as I started practicing the principles and praying for people that I hated and I didn't like, they disappeared from me. And I can't deny it, because there were 75 of them, and I knew I felt different. Every time one of them came into my presence, I didn't feel like choking them anymore. Or I didn't feel like turning around and walking away. So something was happening, and I needed to realize these things. And today when I'm sponsoring other people, I need to hear convincing testimony like that to know that they're having the same experiences that I had. They'll be mouthing the same things to you, kind of in an inscripted code. Sometimes you just kind of just lead them around a little bit and whoop. Yep, that's the same thing. That's what we're talking about. All right. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill towards all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. So true for me. Another revelation that happened. When I started praying my resentments away, after I've learned the futility and the fatality of them, I did come to find out that other people were just as imperfect as I was, and that they were allowed to be wrong and have their faults the same way I had mine. There was only one difference. Now I was aware. I don't know if they were aware or not, but I'm aware. And I've had many of occasions since where people have come up to me and they're going off. Just going flap off the chain because they didn't like a decision I made or something I did, or I cut them off. And I promise you, I'm a Catholic Irish alcoholic, and the last person you want to really piss off and get to fight, and I'm the first one to fight. I love to fight. I've fought all my life. I grew up with 5 older brothers and 5 older sisters. And I wouldn't think twice about slapping you upside the head. Something happened, because when somebody does that to me today, I don't even bow up. I don't even get in posture. And it blows me away. I look at them, I look them in the face, I say, is there something I can do to help you? And it takes all the energy right out of their self. Because they're already displaying the crapped out behavior. And I'm coming back to them in a non-threatening way. And how that happened was a miracle. Because I promise you, there was 30 years of my life up to this point that wasn't my character. That was another miracle. It was another something that happened as a result of me doing this work. We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. What it's saying is we got a list of the people we've wronged. and that we're willing, we must be willing, to go and make amends. If and when we can, it's not going to injure them or anybody else. In this book, you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you are convinced now. We hope you're convinced now, right now, at this point. Now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. If you have already made a decision in an inventory of your grosser handicaps, you have made a good beginning. That being so, you've swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. And that's basically where the 4-step ends, right there. All I ever learned out of the 4-step, honestly, and I was hoping to have this great big pink cloud experience and life was going to be wonderful, and I hear these people have these great spiritual feelings and they feel so close to God. Yeah, I felt like God was entered back into the picture. It wasn't a pink cloud experience for me. It was an understanding for me. I gained a lot of depth and knowledge about myself, about what a selfish, self-centered prick I was. I learned that I was afraid of everything. And I learned that I couldn't live with these things called resentment. And I realized that I couldn't hurt people anymore, is what I learned out of the 4-step. Because if I was doing that and I was leading my life in that way, it was going to be cutting and blocking me off from God on a regular basis. And for me, that leads to powerlessness. And if I go back to that powerless spot, which is the 1st step, I'm headed for certain trouble or certain disaster. And I also come to find out that when I'm living my life avoiding being that old person, life just seems to go easier and better. It's the easier, softer way. I want to do it. I want to do the right things today because I want to feel good. I want to be proud of who I am. I want to be a person of integrity. I want to be a person of dignity. I want to be a person of honesty and humility. I want to be a person that's capable of helping others. On page 70, full paragraph, in the preceding paragraph that turns over into page 71, basically lets you know everything that you should have learned if you've done your 4-step correctly. This is the information that you should have derived out of the 4-step. Okay? There's like 5 or 6 things there. And if you go through it, that's what we learned throughout the 4-step. That's what we just discussed over the last 15 minutes. We're going to flip up now to chapter 6. The into action chapter. Because faith without works is dead. Faith without works is dead. Having made a personal inventory, what shall we do about it? We've been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. We had admitted certain things. We have admitted certain things. We have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which, when completed, will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves, to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs, the exact nature of our defects, Wrongs, defects, it's all the same thing. This brings us to the 5th step of the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter. How do I sum all this up? First of all, we always got to remember that each step is completely reliant and dependent upon the next step. You can't work a 4-step without having worked the first 3 steps. You can't work a 2nd step without having worked the 1st step. And you can't do the 3rd without the first 2 in front of it. The importance of the 4th step is so that we can be rid of it in steps 5, 6, and 7, and 9. In the fourth step, you talked about 4 major categories, but out of the 4 major categories, you ended up with 6 overall lists. And the 2 additional lists, one being your 6-step list of defects of character, and the other list being your 8-step list, which is the amends that you're going to have to make. 99 9/10 of everything that you're going to do for 6 and 8 was already done when you did the 4th, if you did it the way it's presented in this book. It's impossible for us to cast out the exact nature of our defects if we don't know what they are. This requires more action on our part. When completed, will mean we have admitted to God, to ourselves, to another human being, the exact nature of our defects. This other human being, we need to be mindful of. Some of us might want to use our sponsor, our so-called sponsor. Some of us might want to go to the duly appointed authority at the church for a more religious member. You might want to go to your rabbi or to your priest or to your preacher, somebody that's authorized to keep a tight lip and would never hurt you with such details of your life story. The book in this chapter is going to go into that, and there's a lot of good reasons why. It's not hard to see. To be quite honest with you, when it comes to 5th steps with me anymore, I'm serious. I'd rather just start charging. There's a lot of things that I could just do without. Where could my time be better spent? I don't mind doing them. I just, there's some part of it that I don't like, and I think it derived out of me. People in their life stories and some of the things that they've done, I really don't want to hear. I've heard some horrifying things, and it was like, I wasn't looking for all this. I really wasn't. And to be completely honest with you, there's probably some things that you wouldn't want to hear also. I had one guy ask me one time, do you think that this means I'm a serial killer? You got to ask the question, what this? Do you think this means I'm a serial killer? I mean, that's like asking, do you think I'm an addict? If you got to ask, you probably are, pal. And we laugh about it. That's what's crazy. Only us would laugh about that. Only we would laugh about that. But you know what happened? He came back the next day and he said, I shouldn't have said that to you. I said, oh my God. And only we can laugh about things like that, right? What the hell am I going to do now? Now I'm the only guy in the world that knows, right? Got to do away with him next. Oh, man.
Yeah, you're next on the list.
But it's serious, and I could have lived without hearing that. And I've heard it more than once. And I've heard it from more than one individual. And we need to be mindful that when we're sitting in them rooms, maybe even in this room, you're sitting with some very sick people. You're sitting with rapists. You're sitting with murderers. You're sitting with priests. You're sitting with lawyers. You're sitting with doctors. You're sitting with child molesters. In every stretch and sort of imagination. From one end of the spectrum to the other. And it's all in between. That's why you want to think well who it is that's to hear. Just brought to my mind one thing that happened some time back about some guy that dumped in a meeting. He went in and used the meeting as a dumping ground to purge his soul. And he wanted to feel better. He had to tell somebody his conscience couldn't put up with it. He said, I killed 2 people. And it made 2020 because there's 7 people in the meeting all ran to the state attorney and turned the guy in the meeting. And it ended up after a long 5-year court battle that finally the Supreme Court judge, I guess on final appeal, came up with the I guess it's, what the hell would you call it? I'm not an attorney, I'm not that smart. But he threw it out on the grounds that AA is somewhat of a religious program and that he was saying it in confidence. Confession, right. It was a coerced confession and that people shouldn't have did it. It's kind of like was telling it to a priest, and a priest can't ever use it against you. Not allowed to use it against you in a court of law. Same thing with an attorney if he's hired. Some counselors and psychiatrists, things can be done in confidence where it could never hurt you or hit the light of day on you. And I've heard it all in fist ups, from serial bank robbers to that one serial murder. He wasn't sure, but I'll tell you this, he fit the definition. And just anything gruesome sexually that you can possibly think about, I've had to sit and listen to. And I walk away from him and thank God we got the hour afterwards to do the 6 and 7 step, because me being a sponsor, I really need that hour a lot of times just to say, oh man, God. And I have to pray for that person. I got to pray for myself, and I got to ask God to help to keep me strong, because I, as a sponsor, having been honored enough for the person to do that with me, need to know that this shit goes to the grave with me. Can never see the light of day. And in all seriousness, that's the way it's got to be. I promise you, if I ever heard my fist step come back out of my sponsor's mouth, he probably wouldn't have a head. He probably wouldn't have a head. I don't know, but I would like to think that that's probably how I would react. I would probably go somewhat berserk. So we think well. Another part of this, it says that we admit to God, to ourselves, and to another human being. So obviously, anytime that we're going to begin a fifth step, we need to bring God into the equation, is the way it was brought to me. My sponsor shared this with me. He's a real smart guy. I'm sure you all know because you're here to listen to him, but he's not here, so you get to listen to me. He said that wherever 2 are gathered, and they call on God to be the magical third in the mix, that His presence is there, and that you just simply ask Him to become part of the mix, to incline His ear for the story that your person you're helping is getting ready to tell. And He might offer enlightenment to the person and forgiveness. So we start a fifth step with a prayer with the person that we're getting ready to do it with. And that's how we get God into the equation. Okay. The next paragraph here, it says, this is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person. We think we have done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. There is doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We will be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons why we should do so. The best reason first, if we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Oh. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. I mean, what? You can't be more bold. You can't be more plain. There's no more plainer English. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives, trying to avoid this humbling experience. They have turned to easier, softer methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. We think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory all right, but they hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves. But they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. You know, I've been around AA for 20 years. In my first 12 years of existence, I didn't do this. I would not do this. I would not listen to anybody that had this book open and was talking about recovery. I was scared of it. I was afraid. I didn't think that I was going to be able to get it because I tried reading the book and it made no sense to me. And then I seen that they were having meetings where people were reading the book out loud. I wasn't a very good reader, so I shied away from it. When I got to AA, I thought a principal was the head of an elementary school. I didn't believe that anybody lived their lives by principle or morals. But if you were as smart as I was, and you watched people like I watched them, you knew that even though the house was so nice and the family looked so good, you seen the father kick the dog or slap the wife, and that stuff might sound good, but it wasn't actually true, and I didn't trust or believe in it. The Brady Bunch theory that came off of TV didn't exist in real life for me. Damn, I lost track of my thought. I saw right through people. I saw right through people. I trusted no one. That's why I would not have this way. I figured if I had to read out in a meeting that I was going to stumble over the words and I'd feel less than, or somebody might think I'm dumb or stupid. And all them thoughts, all them silly little thoughts, not raising in my hand in a meeting to share because I was scared, because I was afraid what people were going to think, or because my voice might crack while I'm speaking because my nerves start intertwining and acting up. So I shied away from it. The first 5 years of my recovery, I did nothing as far as the steps. Second 6 years, I worked up through step 5. I did it with a sponsor he did it somewhat out of this book, but he did it different. And I had made up my mind that by the time I had gotten up through the 5th step, that I felt good enough and there was no need to go and make amends to anybody for anything I did, and I wasn't willing to and wasn't going to. And as a result of only having done half the work, I was able to stay around for a while, because that time I stayed sober just on that little bit of work I did, I guess, in the first 6 months for 6.5 years. Life got better. Things went well. Got married, had a beautiful little girl, had the home with the swimming pool and the new trucks and the cars and the dogs and the friends and the host of friends of the fellowships that come around and barbecue with you on the weekends and jump in your swimming pool and the vacations and all that stuff. And at about 5 years, I got so cocky that I couldn't sit still and listen in a meeting anymore. If you people would just do what I was doing, your lives would be getting better too, and you wouldn't be sitting there whining and crying in the meetings about the same old thing, and depression started to set in at 5 years, because I was getting bogged down by the responsibilities of the life that AA had given me and the work. Eventually the meetings went. Depression sat in. It got to a point where I couldn't get out of bed. Got to a point where I didn't want to go out of the house and face the world anymore. I had pretty much completely isolated myself other than my family members. And the only thing my poor wife knew to do was to take me to a doctor or to a psychiatrist. I had quit praying altogether. When I did pray, it didn't feel like I was having any effect from it. So it stopped working. I was cut off from the sunlight of the Spirit, I come to find out later. And they put me on medications, one to make me feel better during the day, and one to help me to sleep at night. And hell, you give this addict anything to make him feel better, I'm going to take 3 or 4 more of them, because we're going to feel 3 or 4 times as good. And over the next 3 months of that episode, I rebuilt 3 or 4 homes and done really well. And they sent me to the dentist, and I could take them pills over there that doctor gave me all right, and the dentist just pulled 2 wisdom teeth and gave me a prescription of Percocet. The next thing I know, I was in the bar that night because I could handle the Percocet prescription. And that took off on a tailspin for 1.5 years. I couldn't get out of it. And I didn't even want to be doing that shit to myself. I was powerless. I was doing things against my own will that I didn't even want to do. And I couldn't stop. That's what happened to me as a result of stopping in the middle. That's what happened to me as a result of not being willing to I call it man up. Maybe grow up is a better word. And to man up and do this stuff and be willing to do it at all costs. I only thought that I had lost my egoism and fear. I only thought that I had humbled myself. It lasted for a very brief period of my life. And I was living in a delusion. I thought I was okay. And there was times in that 6.5 years of recovery that the thought to ever have another drink or a drug was probably the dumbest freaking thought in the world. Never thought about it. And if you put it in front of me, I'd say, "You crazy? I'll knock your head off. Get away from me with that crap, you maggot." But there I was again, lost in it. Just a few short years later. And them kind of things scare me. Something happened this last time that I did it, and I came in and I bought the whole barbecue. Or I bought the whole program, if you will. And I knew that the only thing I had never done was truly what was suggested in the thousands of meetings I had sat into, that I had attended in the first 12 years of my existence. And it was read in How It Works. If we want what we have, this is what we do. Rarely have we seen a person fail. Rarely. Almost never. This is what we do. I would do it. I'd get to feeling so good, I wouldn't want to do it no more. It was more important to do something else. So I lost the hunger for it or something, or I don't know. I got sidetracked somewhere. I didn't realize it at the time, but it's something that's happened. And I'm able to look back over my experience now of the years and go, wow, I can't believe that happened. But it did. And it almost killed me. So when this book is saying that the best reason first, if we skip this vital step, we may not overcome in drinking. Back on the bottom of page 70 there, if we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. That's the severity of it. If we skip any one of these vital steps, we may not overcome drinking. That's the problem. Because you need all of them in order to have a successful consummation of power into your life, which is going to solve your problem. And where all that comes from, this successful consummation stuff, comes back from, I believe it's page 25, if you want to flip back real quick to the chapter, There's a Solution. And there is a solution. And it makes perfect sense. I don't know exactly where it is. Let's go to the first full paragraph here. There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of our shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. Man, I hit it on the head. Look at that. I'm getting almost as good as Jim now. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe that in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached by those whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us to do but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence, of which we have not even dreamed. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. If you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there's no middle of the road solution, and that's half measures avail you nothing. There's no middle of the road solution. There's no doing this thing halfway and expecting to get the proper solution or the proper result. It's like having a car with 4 flat tires and only changing 2 of the tires with new tires. It's not going to work. The car's not going to operate. So we can't skimp. We can't skimp. We got to go all the way through it. When we get started, we go all the way through it, 1 through 12. Another big part of the fifth step as a sponsor, one is in the beginning to make sure that you enter God into the picture, bring Him into the equation. The second big part to a fifth step as a sponsor, or somebody that you're doing it with, is at the end, you ask the individual, is there anything you're keeping to yourself that you're not willing to tell me, that you're not willing to tell anybody? Some certain fact of your life that you're just ashamed or embarrassed about that you're going to take to your grave. And if there is, and you're not comfortable telling me, just let me know there is something. And with that being good enough, we'll get you pointed to the direction of where you can maybe safely release that from yourself so that you can be relieved of the guilt, shame, and the remorse that you're carrying for that specific instance. Usually when somebody's approached in that manner, they're going to come out with some of the god-awful things that I want to avoid when I'm listening to a fifth step. I really don't want to hear. It usually comes out. And it's usually, I don't know, probably a 90 percentile. They're holding something back. And with my little bit of experience of what I've heard, it's usually something to do sexual in nature, or some kind of heinous crime. But very important, not to be forgotten, because the book just said they took inventory all right, but they hung on to some of the worst items in stock, and people will hold on to it. I've yet to have anybody say, no, I'm not telling you. I wish that one guy would have. I wish a couple of them guys would have, to be honest with you. And that we could have took them to somebody else who's better equipped to handle something like that. I don't know how much resolve I can give you. Maybe the preacher's going to pray with you or something and really help you to get a good feeling out of it. And in the bottom line, it says, until they've done this, to the sense that we find it necessary, until they told someone else all. A little word, all, is italicized. And it's there in italicized for a reason, because it's all the life story. More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He is very much the actor. To the outer world, he likes to present his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he does not deserve it. It's going back again to tell you, if you're going to... It's going back to talking about the actor again. Now we talked about on page 60, page 61. It talks about our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays, back in 39. It's going back to this because the book and the steps, they all commingle. They start commingling. And if you're doing a 4th step and a 5th step, you need to know about this actor because this is the way we've been acting our entire life. And when you've done a thorough 4th step, you will be able to see that. You will be able to get a good picture of exactly how it is that you've been operating, how you've been manipulating, how you've been playing the chameleon, simply just to be accepted by other people. Why you've been lying, why you've been dishonest. And you're going to find that it's all stemming from a fear base. And you're also going to find that when you're coming from a fear base, if you're in enough fear, you automatically become selfish. And as soon as we turn into self-will, what happens? We're running the show again. God's out of the picture. And we're headed for certain trouble and certain disasters. The importance of sponsorship is so that you can learn the things that I'm talking about. A lot of the stuff I'm talking about today are experience. You find these experiences, one, by doing the work yourself, but you get to grow in understanding and effectiveness by working the 12th step, by carrying this message to other people, trying to help other people to find this way of life. If you want to grow spiritually, you help others. That's the best vehicle we got in order to grow spiritually. What happens when we grow spiritually? We deepen our depth of knowledge and our effectiveness. We're able to help and see people in a lot of other ways. I think it was about my fifth step. I was maybe, I don't know, a year and a half or 2 years clean this time and sober. And I say clean and sober because I'm an addict and it worked perfectly for my addictions as well. I think it was about the fifth step that I listened to. I was a guy, I finished the steps in 35 days. I was working 10, 11, and 12 on a regular basis. I still had a great deal of amends to make, but that was going to take time. And I finished my last amends 5 years later before I was able to actually complete the amends. And that original list is complete. And I take this thing seriously. And where the hell was I going? What I'd learned in about my fifth step was this, and it was the hour afterwards. The guy went out back, he was going to do his 6th and his 7th step, and I usually get quiet just to kind of get all his shit off me. Let it roll off me like water off a duck's ass and get rid of all that schmegma he just spewed all over my back room of my house or in the park or wherever we were. But I realized something because I had the book with me. And I realized that 30 years before I was even conceived as a little sperm egg, my father's twinkling eye, my mother's blessed heart, they had already written a book that would describe every character flaw and problem that I was going to have in life, and also written a solution to it 30 years before I was even born. And I knew from that day forward that all I had to do was simply live my life according to the dictates of the stuff I lived here. My problem was solved. And that it was going to solve any problem I was going to come across. Since then, I've come across a ton of problems. And I'm not shy to tell you, it would have taken a lot of people out. A lot of people would have went out. They wouldn't have been able to deal with some of the stuff that life's thrown at me. But it worked perfectly, and the only reason it worked is because I continue to do the work. Having been a chronic relapser pretty much in the first 12 years and haven't had to go back out. I don't conceive it possible in my own mind today that that I'm cured or anything like that, because we're not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve, contingent upon the things we're willing to do each day. So for me to think today that I got this problem licked and that it doesn't exist for me, it's completely asinine, because I know from my experience of the past that leaving it up to me alone for any period of time and not doing the things that I've been taught to do, I certainly will pick up again. But if I stay vigilant and maintain this way of life that I was taught, I'll probably make it out alive without having to do that. I don't believe I can stay clean and sober the rest of my life. I believe I can stay clean and sober a day at a time. It's contingent upon the things I do each day. And that's what I try to teach. That's all I got for tonight. Thanks.